What if I told you that the loudest places are where silence speaks the most profoundly? We believe social media connects us, but what if it's actually fragmenting our deeper awareness? Think about it. The spiritually awakened aren't announcing their departures with grand posts or digital farewells. They simply fade away. You see, there's a peculiar paradox at work. Those who discover the unified field of consciousness begin to sense the profound disconnect within these digital realms. They start to feel a certain, how shall I put it? A certain artificiality in these connections. But here's the thing. Their withdrawal isn't rejection. It's an embrace of something far more authentic. Their silence on these platforms speaks volumes about what truly matters. You check your phone upon waking. You scroll while waiting for coffee. You share moments of your day with hundreds of people you rarely see in person. We call this connection. We believe we are more connected than any humans in history. With a few taps, we can reach anyone, see anything, know everything. Or so we think. Have you ever noticed how exhausted you feel after an hour of scrolling? Your body is still. Your mind should be at rest. Yet something has been drained from you. Something essential. Think about it. We've created a world where we can speak to thousands, yet struggle to talk to the person across the table. We collect friends like trading cards. We measure our worth in likes and shares. We perform our lives rather than live them. But here's the thing about social media. It's like a pond that shows only your reflection. You see yourself looking back, perhaps slightly enhanced, filtered, improved. But you never break the surface. You never dive into the depths where real life teems with complexity, with messiness, with truth. When was the last time a notification brought you lasting joy? When did a comment thread leave you feeling deeply understood? How many of your online connections would sit with you through the darkest night of your soul? These are uncomfortable questions. They should be. I knew someone once, an influencer as they call them now, hundreds of thousands of followers, comments flowing in like a digital river of validation, always perfectly presented, always inspiring others, always connected. I visited this person at home, found them sitting in a dark room, phone in hand, tears streaming down their face. They looked up, startled by my presence. Real presence. Human presence. And do you know what they said? They said they couldn't remember the last time someone had knocked on their door, had reached out to touch their actual hand, had seen their unfiltered face. They were profoundly lonely. They were starving for connection. Real connection. They were drowning in a sea of artificial light. This is the great irony of our age. We are connected, and we are connected, and we are connected. Yet never before have we felt so isolated from one another, from ourselves, from the natural world that birthed us. What I've come to understand through years of observation is that there is a pattern among those who awaken spiritually, a curious withdrawal from digital spaces, not with grand announcements or final posts. They simply become quieter, less present, until one day they're simply gone. It is not a rejection of others. It is not technophobia or moral superiority. It is something far more interesting. It is the natural progression of expanding consciousness. There are 4 distinct realizations that occur when consciousness expands beyond the digital realm. 4 shifts in perception that change how we relate to these glowing rectangles we've invited into every moment of our lives. And understanding these realizations may illuminate something about your own relationship with the connected world we've built. You see, the first realization that dawns upon the spiritually awakening person is the recognition of time's true value. Time. The only currency we can never earn back. The only resource that diminishes with absolute certainty from the moment we arrive in this world. When someone begins to truly awaken, they suddenly perceive time with a startling clarity. They notice how 20 minutes of scrolling stretches into 2 hours without their conscious choice. They notice how an evening disappears into the infinite scroll, leaving no memory, no growth, no experience worth carrying forward. They notice how quickly a life can dissolve into these digital moments that evaporate like morning dew under the harsh sun of reflection. The awakened person begins to sense time as something sacred, something alive, not as numbers on a clock, but as the very substance of existence itself. Imagine holding your remaining days as water in cupped hands. Would you let them drip carelessly between your fingers while staring at images of other people's carefully curated lives? Or would you drink deeply, feeling each moment on your tongue? When I speak of awakening, I'm not referring to some lofty spiritual status. I mean simply seeing what is actually happening, seeing without the veil of habituation that makes us accept the absurd as normal. The average person now spends over 2 hours daily on social media platforms. 2 hours. That's 1 month per year. 1 full month of your fleeting, precious life given to an algorithm designed specifically to keep you scrolling, to keep you consuming, to keep you generating data that becomes someone else's profit. Think about it in terms of nature. A tree grows in its own time. It cannot be rushed or slowed by opinion or desire. It unfolds according to deeper rhythms, indifferent to our human impatience. The awakened person begins to feel these natural rhythms again, begins to align with time scales beyond the frantic pace of digital life. And in doing so, they often find themselves naturally withdrawing from spaces that demand constant, fragmented attention. But here's the thing, this recognition of time isn't about productivity or achievement. It's about presence. It's about reclaiming the moment as it actually is, not as it is packaged and sold back to us through a screen. Number 2. The second realization is an awareness of attention as sacred currency. The awakened person begins to understand that attention isn't just something we pay. It is the very substance of our conscious life. What we attend to becomes our experience. What we attend to shapes our reality. What we attend to, quite literally, becomes the content of our minds, our memories, our lives. And yet we give it away so casually, so unconsciously. Let me offer a metaphor. Your attention is like breath, essential, life-giving, and largely unconscious until you focus on it. Now imagine someone has built an intricate machine designed specifically to capture your breath, to package it, and sell it to the highest bidder. Would you willingly connect yourself to such a machine? Yet this is precisely what happens each time we engage with social media platforms. They are attention capture machines of unprecedented sophistication. Imagine what happens in your mind when you open a social app. You intend perhaps to check one specific thing, but within moments, your consciousness is hijacked. A notification pulls you one way. An autoplay video pulls you another. A controversial comment ignites an emotional response. Your breathing changes. Your heart rate increases. Your planned 2-minute check-in becomes 20 minutes of emotional reactivity, and the internal dialogue shifts. I'll just check one more thing. I should respond to this. I wonder if anyone liked my post. I need to see what everyone's talking about. I'm missing something important. This will only take a second. The awakened individual starts to witness this process, starts to feel the pull, the drain, the subtle addiction. and they begin asking, is this a fair exchange? Is this conscious use of my most precious resource? Is this truly serving my deepest values? The great paradox of social media connection is how profoundly it disconnects us from ourselves. The more tabs we open, the more feeds we scroll, the more fragmented our attention becomes. And a fragmented attention creates a fragmented experience of life itself. When someone begins to sense attention as something sacred, something worthy of protection and conscious direction, social media often feels increasingly jarring, increasingly intrusive, increasingly obvious in its demands. There is a profound stillness that comes with reclaiming one's attention, a coherence of being that emerges when consciousness is no longer constantly scattered across digital spaces. The awakened person begins to crave this coherence, this wholeness, this return to a unified experience of being. And so the journey continues, deepening with each realization, accelerating as awareness expands. But there are still more profound recognitions awaiting those who continue to question, to observe, to awaken to what is actually happening beneath the surface of our digital lives. The first two realizations are merely the beginning of a fundamental shift in how we perceive ourselves in relation to the connected world. Now, I'm not saying that digital identity is inherently false. That would be too simplistic. But the third realization that dawns upon the awakening individual is the recognition of its fundamentally illusory nature. The persona we construct online, the curated self we project into the digital sphere, the carefully selected fragments of experience we choose to share. At first, it seems so natural, so innocent, a simple extension of ourselves into these new spaces. Yet as consciousness expands, something shifts. A growing dissonance emerges between the lived experience of being and its digital representation. Who is this person in your profile? This collection of preferred angles and filtered moments? This catalog of opinions and affiliations? Is it you? Some aspect of you? Or is it increasingly a performance of you, crafted for consumption by others? The awakened person begins to sense a peculiar doubling of self, the experiencing being and the displayed being, the inner reality and the outer projection. And between these two, a widening gap that requires increasingly sophisticated management. Consider what happens in a forest. When you stand among ancient trees, you are simply and inescapably yourself. The forest does not care about your status or follower count. It does not respond to your personal brand. It simply receives you as you are. Completely. Without judgment or metrics or algorithms determining your worth. What if I told you that this doubling of self, this management of digital identity, consumes enormous psychological energy? Energy drawn away from direct experience, from deep thought, from the kind of inner silence where genuine insight emerges. The awakened person starts to feel this drain viscerally, starts to question whether maintaining these digital projections is worth the fragmenting of their unified being. I knew someone who deleted all social accounts after 15 years of active participation. When asked why, they simply said, "I got tired of watching myself live instead of actually living." A simple statement, yet within it lies a profound recognition that the observer self had overtaken the experiencing self. The documenter had replaced the liver of life. As this third realization deepens, many begin to sense how the performance of identity becomes a kind of cage, a set of expectations to fulfill, a narrative to maintain. Do you resonate with the exhaustion of maintaining consistency across these digital spaces? Have you felt the subtle anxiety of potential judgment on something shared? Have you ever caught yourself living an experience through the lens of how it might be perceived by others, rather than how it feels to you in the moment? These questions lead naturally to the fourth and perhaps most transformative realization: the rediscovery of direct experience. There exists a profound difference between life as mediated through screens and symbols and life encountered directly through the senses, between information about reality and reality itself, between the menu and the meal. Direct experience has a completeness that no digital simulation can approach. The scent of rain on dry earth, the complex sensation of another human's hand in yours, the taste of a sun-warmed strawberry. These experiences engage our full sensory capacity, our complete presence as embodied beings in a tangible world. Yet increasingly, we live in abstract realms, in representations, in symbols divorced from their sensory foundations. We know more and experience less. We connect more and feel less connected. We see more and observe less deeply. This fourth realization often strikes with remarkable force, a sudden recognition of how much of life has been experienced at a remove, through the flattening medium of the screen. The awakened person begins to hunger for the unmediated world, for direct contact with the raw stuff of reality. They begin to notice how different their nervous system feels when engaged directly with the world, rather than through digital intermediaries. The richness, the immediacy, the wholeness of being fully present to what is. And here emerges another paradox. By disconnecting from constant digital stimulus, by releasing the compulsion to document and share experience rather than fully inhabit it, a profound reconnection occurs. Connection to self, to others, to the living world that holds us. By losing the hundreds or thousands of superficial connections maintained through social platforms, deeper connections become possible again. Connections characterized not by breadth, but by depth, not by convenience, but by presence, not by constant availability, but by quality of attention given. This is perhaps why the spiritually awakening individual quietly withdraws from social media. Not from rejection of others, but from a deep recognition that authentic connection requires something more than these platforms can provide. Requires a quality of presence, of undivided attention, of wholeness of being that digital spaces often fracture. As we allow these four realizations to settle within us, as we consider their implications for our own lives, we begin to circle back to that initial observation. The curious phenomenon of the spiritually awake person quietly disappearing from digital spaces. Not with fanfare, but with a gentle fading away, a shifting of presence back toward the direct and the real. Let me tell you something about this silence we've been exploring. The silence of those who awaken and quietly withdraw from digital spaces. It's not the silence of absence. It's the silence of presence. Not the silence of disconnection, but the silence of genuine connection. Not the silence of ending, but the silence of a new beginning. When we understand the four realizations that dawn upon the awakening consciousness, this withdrawal transforms from something that might appear antisocial or judgmental into something profound and life-affirming. It becomes a conscious choice to reallocate the most precious resources we possess: our time, our attention, our authentic self-expression, our capacity for direct experience. Think of it as a rebalancing rather than a rejection, a recalibration of how we wish to engage with both technology and consciousness. The spiritually awakened person isn't necessarily abandoning the modern world or its tools. They're simply recognizing that these tools must serve deeper values rather than unconsciously shape them. I knew someone who gradually withdrew from social media after years of constant engagement. 6 months later, I asked what had changed in their life. Their answer was illuminating. They spoke not of what was lost, but of what was found. Found time for long-neglected creative pursuits. Found depth in fewer but more meaningful relationships. Found a quieting of the inner critic that had been constantly comparing their life to others. But most profoundly, they found themselves. Not the performative self they had maintained online, but something more authentic, more complex, and ultimately more peaceful. This is the integration of all four realizations we've explored. The recognition of time's true value, the protection of attention as sacred currency, the transcendence of illusory digital identity, the return to direct experience. Together, these create not a philosophy of rejection, but a philosophy of conscious engagement, of purposeful presence, of intentional living. But here's the thing. This isn't about demonizing technology or suggesting some pure offline existence as the only path to awakening. Technology itself is neutral. These digital platforms are simply tools, neither inherently good nor bad. The question is not whether to use them, but how. And from what level of awareness? Can you use social media without being used by it? Can you engage with digital tools while maintaining your sovereignty of attention? Can you participate in online spaces without fragmenting your sense of self? Can you balance mediated experience with direct experience in a way that feels whole rather than divided? These questions aren't meant to induce guilt or force immediate action. They're invitations to a more conscious relationship with the digital realm. Invitations to notice, to observe, to become aware of patterns that may have formed without your full participation or consent. The relationship between technology and consciousness is still in its infancy. We are the pioneers, the early navigators of this unprecedented terrain where human awareness meets algorithmic design. There are no perfect maps for this territory. Only the compass of our own deepening awareness. What serves consciousness expands consciousness. What fragments consciousness diminishes consciousness. What nurtures wholeness creates wholeness. This simple understanding can guide our choices in even the most complex digital environments. As we conclude this exploration, we return to that curious paradox we began with. The silence of the awakened in the loudest spaces of our modern world. Now we can see this silence with new eyes, not as disconnection, but as reconnection with something more fundamental. In a world that increasingly mistakes information for wisdom, noise for meaning, and constant connection for genuine relationship, there is a quiet revolution happening, one person at a time, awakening to deeper possibilities of being. One consciousness at a time, choosing quality of engagement over quantity of engagement. One heart at a time, remembering what it means to be fully, completely, undistractedly present. And perhaps in witnessing this pattern, in understanding these realizations, you might discover something valuable for your own journey. Not a prescription, but a possibility. Not an imperative, but an invitation. An invitation to notice where your precious life energy flows. An invitation to reclaim your sovereignty of attention. An invitation to remember the irreplaceable value of your direct, unmediated experience of being alive. The choice, as always, remains yours. But now, perhaps, it can be a more conscious choice. A choice illuminated by understanding rather than shaped by habit or social expectation or technological design. The truly connected know when to disconnect. The truly social understand the value of solitude. The truly awake recognize where authentic life actually happens. And in that recognition lies freedom.